Welcome to Benchwarmers, your summer destination for sports talk here on Midco Sports. I'm Alex Heinert, coming to you from our Grand Forks studio because today this episode is all about University of North Dakota athletics. We're going to be talking a lot about Fighting Hawks football, but not on this episode. That's going to come up later in the summer, so hold off on that for a bit. Instead, we're going to focus on UND's winter sports, like UND men's and women's basketball with Shawn and Val Sussex. We're going to start, though, with a conversation about UND hockey with this man, longtime radio voice of the Fighting Hawks, Tim Hennessy. Tim, you want to come talk about UND hockey for a little bit?
Let's do it.
We're going to go to the studio really quick. Stick around. Big show coming up with hoops and hockey here on Benchwarmers.
Thanks for watching Benchwarmers, presented by Avera Orthopedics.
We've gotten to the regionals over the last couple of years. It's just now let's try to get over that hump of getting into the Frozen Four and having a chance to win another national championship. And it's so tough. When you get to the NCAA tournament, it's a one and move on or one and done. And you have to be, everything has to be going right at that time. And I think just for us, not only as players but as a staff, how do we do that? How do we get there? And how can we attain that? And I think that's the exciting part.
Brad Berry set to enter year 8 in charge of his alma mater. Tim Hennessy has been part of the program for 5 times that long. 44 years now coming up this season.
Coming up on 44, right, Alex?
That's an incredible stretch of longevity.
Just means nobody else would have me. I think that's what that means.
Well, this last season, your latest that you were a part of for UND, it felt like this team really exceeded expectations to do what they did based on the numbers of top players they lost from the year before. How did they do what they did to win a third straight NCAA
I don't know, Alex, to tell you the truth. And I've been around for Rube Bjorkman, Gino Gasparini, Dean Blaze, Dave Hackstall, Brad Berry, and I could point to individual things for each of those guys that Gino, when he had good players, he won. Dean, when he didn't have the great players, he won. Dave he got hosed at every turn. He had good players and good teams and just couldn't quite get over the top. But Brad Berry, like he did in 2016, he had great players. 2 years ago, he had great players, and they won. Last year, it wasn't really that story, and he made them a good team. And I point a lot to that because, like I say, I've seen the progression through the coaches, and there were teams that Gino had that he won championships with that I don't think Dean would have, and vice versa, right? And Brad, I think, I got to give the credit to the coaching staff with Dane and Carl and Homer and the rest of those guys because, frankly, they had no business being where they were and what they did. But they made the team believe, and it was a great season, regardless of what fans or anybody else says. That was a great season.
Yeah, well, they were picked to finish 3rd coming into the year, and even that seemed maybe a little generous based on how much they lost.
Yeah, but North Dakota, you're good.
Well, and that's just it. You get the benefit of the doubt. They turn over half the roster, and they still made it work. And despite the fact that they lose so many key guys during that run, where Jake Sanderson didn't play hardly at all in the second half, and a different key guy went out each week, and they just kept finding.
Yeah, we got hosed on the Jake Sanderson deal, and I told him that when he left. I said, Jake, I feel like I've got something taken away from me not being able to watch you for more games, And yeah, I mean, you've got an elite player there. I mean, one of the most elite players we've had for a while. And you take him out, and you take Hayne out, and you take how many other guys were out, and how many guys missed games, how many games did they have injury things, that they count up. It was incredible what they did. I mean, Jandrick was certainly a big move in the offseason, right, on defense. And Ethan Frisch might be the most underrated defenseman in college hockey, I think. But, yeah, what they did, it was really satisfying to watch. It really was, because they shouldn't have been there, but they were, and almost got there, right?
The cool thing about this group, and you mentioned that the guys who had to step up because of the key players who were out. Now, the majority of that group is coming back. And so I think expectations now get to grow a bit, where even though they do lose a guy like Jake Sanderson, you lose Connor Ford, you lose your main goaltender, et cetera. There are holes to fill. but so many of those young players got experience playing roles they wouldn't necessarily have gotten this last season. That means the bar is set pretty high for
Yeah,
this
it's
thing.
huge, and especially defensively. You look at them, right? And we're talking about goaltending. They brought the kid in from Michigan State. I don't know how good he is or whatever. Helston was good when he was in there, for sure. Cooper Moore was a guy who probably wouldn't have got as much ice time had it not been for the injuries and the situations that were going on. But that kid is pretty good. And another year behind him. I mean, and Tyler Clevin coming back is huge because he's probably the best defender in the NCHC, I would say, in my opinion anyway.
Now, for you, as you look at this roster, there are a lot of names coming back. And as you said, Drew DeRitter from Michigan State comes in to fill a hole at goaltender. They bring in a couple of experienced defensemen, plus freshmen as well. But there is that unknown factor. You just don't know how quickly these guys are going to slot in until they get here.
Yeah, but you know what we found, particularly last year, Alex? They only bring in guys that are going to fit.
Yeah.
I mean, one that probably was iffy was Ashton Calder, and he's not coming back. And where did he go? He ended up
Penn State.
Penn State. And not anything against Ashton, but there is a cult, or whatever you want to call it, at North Dakota, their culture, right? And I think these guys only bring guys in that fit into that. So that doesn't concern me. I think whoever they're bringing in is going to fit in.
One of the new freshmen that UND is bringing in, at least we expect, is Jackson Blake, who's the son of Jason Blake, who you would have been well versed with over your time. It's got to be fun that, again, when you've covered this team for so long, you've seen a number of second-generation guys make their way into this program, into this league.
There's been so many of them. It's, I think the first one was Mark Chorney and Taylor. And now Taylor's retired from the NHL. Come on, are you kidding me? But there's been many through the years. And I'm sure, I've heard a lot of nothing but great things about Blake, that he's a great player and say he's a little different personality than his dad was, which is okay. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him play, no doubt.
Yeah, over the course of time, when you see, and we've seen this not even from UND players, but like Taylor Ward, for example, with Omaha, whose dad Dixon was here for so long. Do you see similarities when you have the son come in? Or are there expectations maybe for you as you're thinking and going through? I remember what your dad played like. I remember his style. You are a carbon copy, or you are so different from what
I think
we
the
expect.
kids are better than their dad was. And I'll just go back to Taylor Chorney, Mark Chorney. Mark was a very good defenseman, had a nice career in the NHL. Taylor was better skater, but everything is different now, right? I mean, those kids develop and are developed through programs and through practice and whatever they go through to become better players. Back then, you put in your time, and there was no summer workout program or anything like that. Now they're doing it all year long, and I've always found that the kids are better players than the dads were.
It's amazing how that bar just continues to get raised. Last thing for you, Tim, as you look ahead to this season, a lot of big series on the docket. If there's one you circle on your calendar as a big one for UND, what stands out to you?
Well, of course, Denver, and I think we're going to Denver. We don't go to Duluth. The scariest team to me always is Duluth, because you can't just show up and beat those guys, ever. It just doesn't happen. And I've told Scott Sandlin several times about the golden horseshoe he has somewhere. That has been, and he's admitted it to a point, but they're the scariest ones. I look forward to the league series more than anything, because they're all good and all competitive, and I think that's what makes this league the best in college hockey.
Yeah, it should be fun, entertaining to watch this group go at it once again for going for 4 in a row in the NCHC.
Wow.
Tim, we appreciate you. Best
Thanks,
of luck.
Alec.
Year
Appreciate
44
that.
for Tim Hennessy is the longtime radio voice of UND hockey. Brian, Shawn, Val Sussex will join us next to talk UND hoops, men's and women's basketball talk coming your way next on Benchwarmers.
I think the biggest thing is just that we're taking steps in the right direction. I don't think 15 and 15 is exactly where we want to be. 500 is not exactly the goal for this program. But we have to go somewhere. You have to start somewhere, and to go from 2 to 15 is a big jump. So I think that when you look back, you say, yeah, would have loved to have done a lot more, but at the end of the day, we made progress, and I think that's at least the stepping stone to where we're trying to get.
Valerie Bernhardt getting set to enter her third season in charge of UND women's basketball. Here to talk about it, Brian Shawn, Val Sussex. This past season for the UND women, great turnaround from what we saw the year before when Val was the interim head coach. What was the biggest reason, Val, why they made that improvement to be top 5 in the league, 15-15 overall, 9-9 in the Summit?
Gosh, I think it really came down to confidence, learning to play together, and then defining some roles. So I think those were the 3 big things. Coach Bernhardt did a nice job in the offseason, really drilling down the skills. They had lacked some of those fine, just the fine work that they did on skills, and then they did a lot of that last summer. And then they really turned attention to the team game. And then you had stars step up, like a Casey Borovich had an awesome year. Melissa Leet had some really big minutes exactly when they needed her. And then the role play of like a Claire Orth or a Maggie Manson hit the big shots when you needed to. And that helped them win games down the stretch. So those would probably be the big 3 for me.
Yeah. Brian, what did you see last year?
Well, I think you saw some players really coming in there. I thought Claire Orth offensively, she took such a huge leap, and they really needed that secondary scoring outside of Casey Borovich, who was finally healthy for a whole year. I think that was really important. You saw what she was able to do really on her own, at times just take over games. We saw that against the University of South Dakota here. But as you mentioned, I think the size underneath played a huge role. Melissa Leet had a really good senior year. And they hit enough shots to, I think, stay in games. And it was different players at different points. But I think three-point shooting is something they certainly want to improve upon. Even this year, that was a little bit streaky throughout last season.
Yeah, late in the season, this team was in line to be the 3 seed in the Summit League tournament, and then just things didn't quite finish the way they wanted to. It just shows how far this program progressed last year, where finishing 5th felt like a disappointment, even though they would have taken that after missing the tournament the season before.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There was one point, and I thought, oh, geez, this is going to turn out to be great. Sitting in the 3 seed, we had to play the South Dakotas next. We had South Dakota and South Dakota State both next, and those were such hard games. And then they just kind of hit a few road bumps after that. Had to go on the road, lost a tough one at home. You could feel the growing pains of a long season with a short bench, I think was a big thing. There was a lot of players playing a lot of minutes, and they almost ran out of gas there towards the end.
With that said, this group does bring back a lot of the talent that we saw have success this last year. With a couple of, you mentioned Melissa Leet, Olivia Lane, they've got some people they've got to replace. But they do bring in one of the best recruiting classes that we've seen UND have in a long, long time, a really talented group that's coming in for this club.
Yeah, you're talking about some really highly touted players that had some Power 5 offers that they were able to recruit to come here. Some 4-star, 3-star kids out of Milwaukee and Michigan that they built relationships with. And they're a different looking athlete than what we've seen at North Dakota in the past. You look at Beal, some of these other kids that they have coming in, they're very, very talented. They're long. I think they can do some things defensively. And then it's been tricky too, trying to add some pieces late, trying to replace that size. That's, I think, been the biggest challenge. They're not going to be as big as they were last year, certainly underneath. They're going to have to make up for that with some toughness and experience underneath as well.
And I think it'll be okay in the Summit League. We don't see overly large teams. When North Dakota really struggled last year, it was when they had mobile 5s, when they were playing against 5s that were super mobile, that stretched out around the perimeter. It was hard for Melissa Leet to get out there and guard, and it was those mismatch issues. So if North Dakota does play maybe a little bit smaller than they're used to, but gets more athletic and can shoot the ball well, I think good things will happen for them.
Yeah, you mentioned UND's place in the league, and it feels like the Summit League's changing a little bit. You've got new coaches at a couple of different spots. South Dakota's going to be in a bit of a rebuild after a deep run to the Sweet 16. Is this next year maybe a year too soon because they will be young to make a push, or is there an opportunity to be right there, maybe in a second position behind a loaded South Dakota State team coming back?
I think after SDSU, I think you throw, again, with the transfer portal and coaching changes, Kansas City is a totally different looking team. Oral Roberts could be a very different looking team. We don't know yet who's going to be coming back even with their new head coach. So again, with so much in flux with the rosters, even to this point in the summer, it's hard to really know for sure who's going to be hanging around and who's actually going to show up on campus when off-season workouts in June. But I think North Dakota has at least enough experience with enough talent coming in where I think they can push for it to be a top half of the league type of team to finish the year.
I completely agree. I think South Dakota State is so good and they're returning so much. So we kind of know what we're going to get with them. But everyone else is kind of a mystery. What's going to happen? Who's going to be there? How is the non-conference schedule going to play out for those teams early? We know North Dakota is going to score. Casey Borovich is going to score the basketball. It's what she does. who's going to step up and help her? You talked about Claire Orth. We talked about the new kids. I'm so excited for their point guard. North Dakota brought in a true point guard for the first time in a long time. Amanda Roach is coming in from Michigan. Heck of a player, lost in the state championship, and she can score the basketball. So to have a true one that can score, slide Casey over, let her play the two a little bit, let her shine as an off guard. I think we'll just have more weapons to be a lot better offensively than we were this year.
One of the other cool things about this, you mentioned again, the kids coming in, the people that are coming back. This is Mallory's now her third year. Now you get to see kind of her stamp on this program. Even though she'd been with the program for a long, long time as an assistant, now it's finally feeling more like her team moving forward.
I almost feel, though, Alex, it's year 2. Because even that interim year, it's so tough to recruit and so tough to really take control of things when you still don't know for sure if you're going to be in that chair the next season. So I really feel like you saw the huge leap when she finally became a head coach and knew that she was going to be here and really had some kids committed to her, and I think that made a big difference.
And she'll have them all on campus this summer. June 12th, the team will come in. They'll get those 8 weeks of practice. They'll get 4 on-court instruction hours each week. Mal will break it up, a little bit of skills, a little bit of team stuff, and I think they'll take another big step this summer, and they'll be ready to roll this fall.
Yeah, it's exciting. Not that far away from getting things rolling here for year number 3 for Mallory with UND Women's Hoops. We're going to talk men's hoops for North Dakota when we come back with Brian and Val. Stay tuned to Benchwarmers here on Midco Sports.
Benchwarmers on Midco Sports, presented by Avera Orthopedics.
It's learning how to be a closer, closing possessions, closing halves, closing games, but also, getting your job, closing each day in the weight room, closing each day in practice. What can I be doing to help this team be successful? And those are things, just some of those key words are words that we need to get better at.
Paul Sather now entering year 4 in charge of North Dakota men's basketball. We're going to continue the conversation with Brian and Val. Brian, this team, had moments last year, but obviously we knew it was going to be a bit of a transition year based on what they had leaving the program. What maybe held them back from having the success that we've kind of gotten used to seeing North Dakota men's basketball have in recent years?
I think a couple of younger junior college players coming in, having to play prominent roles right away, not really having time to adjust. But I think you have to go back and look. They actually were playing okay in November and even early December. Then Caleb Nero gets hurt and he was playing well. He's out for 6 weeks. Then Mitchell Suker gets hurt and he's done for the rest of the year. All of a sudden, 2 big cogs and 2 more experienced guys that you had on the roster are completely out and really out of the rotation. And I think you had to force some guys and force feed some minutes to some guys and have them learn on the job, and that's not the easiest thing to do. But you hope maybe those minutes and that experience will catapult them into the summer and hopefully put them ahead going into year 2 for a lot of these guys that got their first experience of D1 ball this past season.
Yeah. Val, you've been a part of teams where you lose key pieces that you didn't expect to lose. How tough is it to overcome when, 2 of your key starters just aren't there for the majority of the season?
It's hard, especially when your bench isn't very deep. And I think that was the thing with North Dakota. They just started with such a short bench, and then you lose such key players. And I think there was a player that quit halfway through the year, and it was tough. But they played so darn hard. That was the thing. Like, to go to the games and watch and cheer them on and be a fan in the stands, you never could question how hard they were going to play. You never questioned the effort. I can remember Brady Danielson flying into the front row at the Betty, trying to save a ball right in front of us just to give his team one more possession. And that's a kid that comes every day to work hard, probably playing outside of his role that he really should be in, but he does it with a smile on his face and he works so darn hard. And it, just like Brian said, a lot of those guys were kind of pushed into a role where the headlights came on, the lights came on, and they just had to figure it out on the fly. But I do think it'll help them in the long run for next season. Yeah.
One of the unfortunate things about last year, the main bright spot of the team was Paul Bruns, who was the freshman of the year in the conference. He transfers to South Dakota. Again, 2nd year in a row that Paul Sather and this staff have done a phenomenal job finding some diamonds in the rough, bringing them, developing them, but then they don't get them for their sophomore season.
Yeah, and again, Bruns' only D1 offer out of high school was to North Dakota. And I think that's one of those situations where it's not the only or last time we're going to see it in the Summit League of players transferring within the conference. I think we're going to see it more and more and more. The portal, you can turn things around really quick, but it can also hurt you and really be a huge detriment to your program really quick too. So I think coaches that adjust to that the best are going to have the most success because, again, the rosters we see this year are going to look hugely different from the ones that we've seen in the past. it's almost like starting over for a lot of these programs. We're seeing 6 to 8 new players in each roster consistently in the Summer League.
Yeah, it's sign of the times, isn't it? It is just a different roster almost every year around the league.
Yeah, it is. The transfer portal is an interesting thing. You can go into it, but you can't always come out of it, really. And you can't always go back to where you came from. It's coach by coach preference on that sort of thing. It's so much different from when I played. We didn't really have that. Coach Roebuck didn't have to worry about recruiting me to North Dakota while I was at North Dakota. And that's the thing now is you've got those 12, 13 full scholarships. You got to keep those guys, and then you got to continue to keep them, but you got to find new ones, but you got to continue to keep them. That's the hard part. You're constantly recruiting the kids you already have when you should be focusing on the kids that are coming in. So I don't think it's changing. So they just have to learn to adapt. And like you said, the coaches that can learn to embrace it and work through the changes are going to be the ones they're going to come out on the other end.
You both mentioned, again, some pieces at least that are going to be in place for this North Dakota roster moving forward. Who did you see, Brian, that really showed potential to be a sticking type player in the Summit League for UND?
I think Sone Sartsidze at times was a really good big man. I think he was just a little inconsistent. Matt Norman, same thing, had some huge games, and then other games he kind of fell off. And that's just what you see with a lot of young players. And again, these guys were only in junior college for a year before they got here. So they were only sophomores technically, and really only freshmen when you look at eligibility. But then you look at some of the other pieces they are adding, they're getting much longer. That was a huge focus. They have to get better defensively. I mean, teams were shooting 48% against them last year, which is, not good. It was worse in the league and one of the worst in D1. And I think Paul Sather is adding guys that are longer and more athletic, trying to build more depth of guys that can hopefully help them this season.
Yeah, we talked about the recruits for the women's team. The men's team has some pretty good recruits coming in. Some of those guys who are going to add to that length, that's going to make a difference as long as they can hit the ground running as quick as they can. Yeah. Big thanks to Brian and Val for taking some time to chat hoops this summer. Brian's got a couple of blogs coming out about UND men's and women's hoops. Be sure to check those out on midcosports.com. Stick around. We'll wrap things up for you on Benchwarmers right after this. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Benchwarmers. Big thanks to Brian, Shawn, Val Sussex, and Tim Hennessy for joining us. Be sure to tune back in next week when the focus will shift to South Dakota State. We'll go down I-29 and talk Jackrabbit Athletics. Tom Neiman back as the host and a host of others chatting about SDSU. That's coming up next Wednesday night. Until then, I'm Alex Heinert. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the start of summer. We'll see you next time on Benchwarmers.